Hey, hello, and welcome to the Event Marketers Toolbox. I am Chris Dunn with Blue Hive Exhibits. We're here with a couple of friends again today. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm here with my coworker and cohort, Dana Esposito, and we've also got Rachel in the house. But hey, Dana, how are you? How have you been? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm good. I'm good. I know you've been out world traveling in exhibit world here, but
Mhm.
it's good to have you back in Massachusetts. So I'm Dana Esposito. I've been in the industry almost 30 years on both the exhibit design side, creative leadership, and corporate strategy. And today we are talking with Rachel Weeks. So, Rachel, you want to give us a little intro?
Hi, yes, thank you so much, Chris and Dana, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've got over 20 years of leadership experience in marketing. I've had the pleasure of working with Blue Hive in the past at a number of companies. Some places I've worked are Healthcare Source, Reward Gateway, and MPHR. So I've been around the HR tech space for quite some time, and trade shows have already always been a really big part of our marketing plans. So I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. And you're a neighbor. You're right down the street.
I'm in Billerica, Massachusetts.
You're in Billerica, Mass. I'm in Andover. Dana, currently in Worcester. But we're all Massachusetts people here, so we're lamenting our Red Sox just a little bit. Although, I think almost everybody out there, right? It's like, what's your second favorite team? It's anybody who's playing the Yankees. So currently, a Blue
Go
Jays
Toronto.
fan, having seen Toronto dismantle the Yankees, make us feel a little bit better
Yeah.
about that. So. Hey, this is going to be a great conversation with Rachel. Rachel, this is really cool. We were chatting, prior to recording here, and we talked a little bit about. I think you might be the very first person who's come on who actually is and was a Blue Hive client, and that's to some extent that's by design because we don't want to turn this into a Blue Hive commercial, which is I'm going to be speaking out of both sides of my mouth because I'm going to do an ad read, talk about Blue Hive. So, anyways, but that is what it is. But we're looking forward to having a great conversation here. This is a live show. It will show up. It is recorded, and it will be available here on LinkedIn as well as YouTube in the future, as early as I think Friday or Saturday. You will find this episode show up on your favorite podcast platform. But from a live show standpoint, one of the great things that makes this a little bit more interesting is the fact that we have people who are watching us. Feel free to drop into the comments. Who are you? Where are you? And hopefully participate in the conversation. Rachel's going to bring a lot of great things to the table here with regards to employee recognition and just making sure that we've got gratitude oozing through our organization and all the benefits that kind of come from that. So before we officially start that great conversation, two sponsors. One is the company that Dana and I work for, Blue Hive Exhibits. A little bit about us. We are a 20-year-old creative organization. We have both East Coast and West Coast representation. We have shops where we actually build in both locations. We have warehouses. We really have two kind of independently operating facilities. We work together. And the Vegas operation is actually expanding as we speak. We just added another 19,000 square feet to that location. So we've got a ton of stuff going on the West Coast. We help out our clients. And one of the benefits of using a group like us is you might build your booth here in the Boston area. But if you have a bunch of West Coast shows, that booth goes out to the West Coast, Vegas, San Diego, San Francisco, LA, all of the places along that coastline. We can service from that location, which is nice and close, saving a lot of money on shipping. Secondarily, we have the folks at Fist Bump who are helping us with this broadcast. This is a group that I kind of ran into a couple of years ago, and the initial conversations were really built around LinkedIn and brand building and presence on the platform, and it really evolved into the idea of this podcast, which is super cool. This is episode number 41. I'm happy to say we've been doing it every single week since the first of the year. So we have a bunch of experience, and hopefully our conversations are getting better. We're doing a better job, but we're building a community of like-minded event professionals and marketing professionals here. And we invite conversation, and we're just trying to, kind of, I guess, build the plane as we fly it, right? And do this in front of folks and invoke a conversation and create a community where we can have great sharing back and forth with ideas and so forth. And hey, Zadia, how are you? She's one of our favorite Jersey girls. She is a super listener of our podcast and show. So thanks for joining us. Feel free to drop some comments in. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Dana, and you can start off with some of these great questions we've got for Rachel.
All right, Rachel. So we're going to pick your brain and we want you to start telling us a little bit about why recognition matters and matters more than ever.
Yeah, I think that we've all experienced different types of cultures and companies, some good, some bad. And so you can draw from experiences of, boy, I really, hope that I don't have to live through this type of experience again, if you had one of those. And then also like, wow, I really had a great experience at this company and there's things that I love about the culture. And I want to make sure that I look for those things, in companies moving forward. And I really had the pleasure of working for Reward Gateway, which makes a platform for reward and recognition. And so, we really lived our values, we used our platform. And like I said, it just gave me such an appreciation for the importance of being part of that type of culture and also being a leader in that type of culture. But then also, there's a legitimate business impact that goes along with it. And I might not have necessarily learned that had I not been at a company that was trying to sell a technology to support it.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's part of it.
Yeah. So talk about too, like the hidden link between employee appreciation and engagement and retention, how that
Yeah,
all.
absolutely. That's exactly. You hit the nail on the head, Dana. Like employee recognition and appreciation can lead to, business impacts such as improved retention, just like you mentioned, higher productivity, greater job satisfaction and motivation. And then overall, that reduces stress and burnout. And there have been studies done by, numbers of different companies, that show that people would often prefer recognition to a financial incentive as a form of motivation. People might not think that that's true, but it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And that, people won't necessarily look for another job if they feel like they're being recognized, at the job that they're at. And so, again, the opportunity to, work with so many customers and collect this data on why and how recognition, can really impact the bottom line of the business as a growth marketer, that's really important to me.
Yeah.
And as a leader, that's also really important to me, from a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
And I just want to be very clear from the get-go of this conversation. Number one, I don't work at Reward Gateway anymore. But also you do not have to have a platform to have a recognition program at your company. So like we can talk about that a little bit more as our time goes on. But, I just wanted to say that up front since that's where I started.
When I've read a lot, some books about this exact subject, and in some of the books that I've read, they talk about how some business owners or leaders, they're like, well, we do have a really good culture, or well, if they work late, like I'll get them pizza, like, and in their mind, that is leading when it comes to like really recognizing a contribution. They're working late, I got them pizza, where it's not necessarily. It's a lovely thing, but it's not necessarily what you're talking about. So can you explain how leaders actually can recognize what contributions are, like in an authentic, meaningful way?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, Dana. At first and foremost, recognition, a culture of recognition has to come from the top of the organization. So, first and foremost, the CEO has to believe that having a culture of recognition is going to make a positive impact on the business. And they have to, walk the walk as much as they have to talk the talk. And if executive leadership is doing that, then that will filter down, throughout the rest of the organization. And so, executive leadership, if they're committed to building a culture of recognition, they have to think about, well, what types of behaviors do we actually want to recognize? And working late, especially you're working towards an event, you've got huge deadlines that there's no flexibility whatsoever. And sometimes you have to work really late. Getting pizza, I mean, that should be table stakes. Your people have to work through dinner, like they've still got to eat. That should be table stakes. But is there a value associated with your company that supports, hard work to meet deadlines? That's the behavior that you want to recognize.
Mhm.
and that's where you want to take the opportunity to say that, this particular team in the warehouse went above and beyond because they were there till 11 o'clock last night and they met the deadline and everything was great.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, they got pizza,
Yeah.
but that's not what's driving the behavior. What's
Mhm.
driving the behavior is that the company has a culture that hard work is going to be recognized and rewarded, and that we're going to make sure that that as an employee of the company.
So for your specific company, if you're a leader and you're like, I really want to, get some
Mhm.
eyes on this and think about this in a way that's meaningful for your company, think about specifically your company, what your company culture designates as what are these meaningful things, whether it's if someone has to work late or if someone had to travel a lot or whatever it is. Every company's different, so what are the things that is a little bit of a above and beyond situation that your company recognizes that they're going to recognize,
Yes.
right? And then once you kind of have that list, and don't I would say whenever you're making a list, what that affects a lot of people, don't make a list in a vacuum, right? Like
Mhm.
talk to your managers, because every team and department is also different, right? If you're saying, well, this is what I believe is what above and beyond according to me or my bubble, that might not apply maybe for, you say, if you have a warehouse in your warehouse team, right?
Mhm.
Depending on maybe how they're paid, if they're salary versus hourly, or if it just all depends on the teams are very different. So don't make that list in a bubble. Bring your managers in and talk about that, because you might get some answers you hadn't thought of. But then what happens when they start to say, okay, we've defined for us what some of our above and beyond things are, what are meaningful ways to like reward those? Because some people, they think, the pizza or like a Starbucks card, which none of those things are bad or wrong
Mhm.
necessarily, but you're talking about things that are deeper than that. So can you talk, if you were to like mentor a leader on what some meaningful ways, what that could look like, what would you say?
Well, first and foremost, I think that, recognition should be, I keep saying a program, but like it should be part of your culture. And, as part of your culture, there are tactics associated with it. And, those tactics are, what are people being recognized for? How are they being recognized? And then is there any type of reward associated with that? And then what would that reward be? Right.
Hmm.
So, it shouldn't be that necessarily. And I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And again, there's no bad recognition, and it's certainly not wrong to give people pizza, or give them an extra bonus for working hard. Everybody appreciates financial incentives. I mean, there's no question about it. But that makes you feel good on the day.
Hmm.
A culture of recognition should really make you feel good every day, or
Mm.
at least it should make you feel good over the course of time that you're part of that culture. And that's because the company has decided on the types of behavior that it's going to recognize. The
Hmm.
warehouse manager might recognize their employees, in certain ways based on behavior that happens in the warehouse, which could be different ways than a manager recognizes an employee, who works in the office. I'm going to give you, a gift card to the lunch place that we all go to every day, which isn't the lunch place that the warehouse guy goes to, so he doesn't want that gift card, right?
Mm.
But it's the ongoing behaviors that you want to think about. How do you get this to be pervasive across the organization, and how do you get people to emulate the behaviors of others? And
Hmm.
again, I think that where I've seen the most successful recognition programs is when they're based on company values. And
Mm.
so, a lot of us, when we're either, we're going through an interview process, maybe we look and see, does the company have values on their website? That says something. What are those values? Well, hopefully, usually those values are about, taking care of your customers and taking care of each other, and, doing the right thing, and, all of those things. But you want them to be worded and presented in a way that resonates with you, so that you can feel like, if I go work at this company, can I emulate these values and lead by example?
Mm.
Yes, I can. So then when I go to that company, I have to emulate those values, and I have to lead by example. So then other people know that those are the behaviors that we expect from them. And then when someone really shines and goes above and beyond and exhibits some of that behavior, and I'll just like super simple example. We had a value at one of my past companies called Own It. It's pretty self explanatory. Just own it, right? And people can say they own stuff every day, blah, blah, blah. But when somebody really goes above and beyond, and then they get recognized publicly at the company meeting or in the company newsletter, or however leadership has decided that they're going to publicly recognize people, because it has to be driven from the top of the organization and everybody has to buy into that. People get excited. First of all, the person appreciates the recognition. Peers and others get excited that the person has received this recognition because presumably they've seen how hard this person has been working.
Mhm.
They recognize that that person is being recognized because they owned it. Then they can say to themselves, I want to be recognized. I'm going to own it. And then they go live that value. And then hopefully they're the next one that's recognized too. So, and that's going all back to marketing. That's what drives growth and engagement. Sorry, to bring it back to
Yeah,
engagement.
yeah.
That's what drives growth and engagement. And it can apply directly to events, as far as how hard people work. Like I said before, deadlines that don't move. The show's going on. If you're
Hmm.
not ready, the
We had our
door
head on that one all the time.
Yeah.
but people have to travel. People spend lots of time. I mean, Chris, I'm sure you're a road warrior. I know others in your organizations are. You spend lots and lots of time away from your families, away from your own bed. And yeah, it's part of the job, and this is career that you chose, and obviously you thrive on it and you love it, otherwise you wouldn't do it. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you don't want to feel appreciated,
Hmm.
and for someone to recognize that you've made these sacrifices, sure,
Hmm.
by choice, but it doesn't mean
Mhm.
they're not sacrifices, to help grow the business. And you're
Hmm.
going to stay at that company a lot longer than the other events company that you did the same amount of travel and you went to the same shows and you did all the same stuff, but they didn't appreciate what you did as an individual, to
Hmm.
support
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we have, so here at Blue Hive, the owner, our leader, Caitlin, who you've met, Caitlin.
Mhm,
I love her, and she's instituted what's called Hive Time. So like once a quarter, the whole company gets together,
mhm,
and like our warehouse is just a couple miles away from the rest of the building, so we always feel a little disjointed, which we all hate because like everybody, we like being together. So this is the one time each quarter where we can all be together in the same room, and even though we're always going back and forth, like we're all in the same room and we get lunch, and sometimes it's pizzas, but sometimes it's different things, and sometimes there've been some pretty interesting things that we get to have. And she gets up in front of us, and what I like is it's an opportunity. I mean, like I can see her anytime. All right, we're both in the same office. I'm very comfortable. I can go in and ask her a question about anything. But there are people who don't even get a chance to run into her very often, but they're working like very dedicated, time away from your family, all this stuff. I mean, it's work. That's what work is. But if you want to be really good at your job, sometimes you can feel invisible, right? So this is her opportunity where she gets up in front of everybody and gives everybody a little bit of an update of maybe some new things that are happening, or maybe some goals that we have. And it's very casual and it's very lighthearted. But what I love about it is, because like back in the day when I first started in the industry, I always felt like I want to do as much as I can because this is the kind of worker I was trained to be growing up. But I always felt like I hate being in the trunk of the car when someone else is driving. I like at least want to be in the back seat so I can see where you're headed and I can hear like where you want to go. Because even if what I do every day is not exactly what you're doing, I know where you're trying to get. I might be able to help in some way, right? So that conversation gives everyone in every office a chance to hear that, like, well, this is what we've done, and by the way, these are some new clients, and by the way,
mhm,
here's some really cool projects we did. Oh, and by the way, just so you know, we just acquired additional warehouse space in Las Vegas because we're growing in a nice like a organic strong safe way, and that affects everybody because there are times where maybe we need to know we have more space in Las
mhm.
Vegas, so like everyone's in the know.
Mhm.
and you feel included as actually part of a community with the company. Like I always say, a company is not a family, but a company is a community. So we
Mhm.
know where you're trying to go. We're all going there together, right? Um, so those are some things that I really appreciate, that she's made a point that she really wanted to do. And then also we have, like the hiver of the quarter, where up before hive time, you can vote on and send in to her or anonymously, vote on someone who's maybe they've owned it, right?
Mhm.
And so not only would we find out who hive time who's won that, who their hive quarter is, and they get a gift certificate. What I really like that she started doing is, and this is just, I just adore this, is she's started reading who some of the other people who were nominated were, and
Mm.
what some of the notes that people were putting in there. Because originally, I mean, it was nice on its own, right?
Yeah.
But you'd find out who won, right? But now it's not just you find out who won. Before that, you find out who else was nominated and what someone said about them.
The
And
other
to me,
20, the other 20 people who've been nominated, and yeah, you're spot on. I've been waiting to kind of add that,
yeah,
but I'm glad you
yeah,
brought that up. That's the
Good
best
job,
that's
part.
Caitlin.
that's
Yeah,
That's
kind
for
of,
the
real.
best
Good
part
job,
of it
Caitlin.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, because
yeah,
that's like one of my favorite parts, because
yeah,
I'm involved in a lot of things, but I didn't even know that, like, oh, so and so, like, I won't say a specific project, but like something that jumped out at me was there was a problem with a piece of fabric, and by no fault of our own, there was a problem with a piece of fabric, and so we expedited to remedy the problem with the fabric. And someone literally said, "I'm going to hop on a plane, fly this out there, like instead of luggage, drop it off, and fly back." Because we wanted to make sure the client's experience was seamless. And so even though it wasn't our fault, it all matters. Like, what don't we, Paul, the gentleman who's founded and started Blue Hive, he always says, don't judge us on just what we do that's great. Judge us on, like, if the poop hits the fan, what happens. And
Mhm.
so this person of their own volition, like, jumped in like a superhero. And like, I hadn't known that happened just because it wasn't a project I was affiliated with. But I'm like, damn, that's someone who's all in, right?
yeah.
So,
That's
like,
somebody who owned it.
freaking well
Yeah.
done, right?
Well, and the other thing about Caitlin reading all the nominees is now everybody's sitting there saying, oh, good, I can nominate someone and they're going to get recognized even
Yeah,
if they don't win.
yeah,
Right.
So she's now perpetuating the
yeah,
Yeah.
behavior that you want to see from the team, which is really just recognizing as many people
yeah,
as you want. I mean,
yes,
there's
yeah.
nothing to not recognize people for. If you feel it,
You still
that's
get
another thing that
recognized,
I've
right?
always said. I mean, it's like the
Yeah,
spirit of Christmas, It's not just about getting the recognition, but it's
Yeah.
about giving the recognition
and in front
and
of
making
everyone.
people feel good in front of everyone. And
And
so,
there's a
yeah, really kudos. I'm glad she added that.
yeah,
And again, I think you'll see even more people submitting,
yeah.
nominations and quotes now that they
So,
know that those are going to be
Yeah.
yeah.
publicly.
And I love
Accepted.
hearing the notes too. Like,
Yeah.
like, Chris was nominated, and because of this on this project. And I'm like, oh, I just, those nuggets. There's so much happens at work that you don't know about. It's so great to hear the positive things. So we always hear bad things in life, right? It's so easy for someone to, like, pick on someone, but it's so great to when people are actually voicing great things that someone's doing.
Yeah.
So I tell that story about Hive Time and what Caitlin's doing with the Hive of the Quarter and stuff, because it's a nice example of what a company has done. And is it can you hear angels singing? No, not necessarily, but it's a cute, easy, smart thing to do. But I'm using it as an example, and I was wondering for anybody else listening, because you've had more exposure to this because of your past, you know, are there other things that you could offer people just as examples to get their brain churning in that way, of like, what would a leader be after they recognize what the values of the company are, like, what are things that they can do as a reward for recognition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, once you decide the behaviors that you want to recognize people for, you decide how you're going to recognize them. Is it at the quarterly company meeting? Is it on the bi-weekly company call? Is it on the weekly newsletter or monthly newsletter? Like, most companies hopefully, have some form of communication from leadership to their clients, and whatever the platform is and the frequency,
Mhm.
that's a good place to incorporate recognition because people are already, hopefully, consuming that content. And so, then there are ways that, maybe not everybody reads the newsletter, they skim it and they don't see everything. Well, what other types of communication or communication platforms do you use at your company? Maybe you use Slack. So maybe you create a Slack recognition channel. And that's a public channel where everybody on the company can see what's posted there. And it's just meant for shout outs. And, that's where you can go on and say, like, hey, Dana did an awesome job on the LinkedIn Live today. Thank you so much. And, doesn't have to be anything fancier than that. But that'll make you feel good, make me feel good because I'm appreciating you. And it's in a public space that the technology already exists. People are already there. If you wanted to take it up a notch, you could create digital assets to give people. At most of the companies, that I've had a recognition program like this, and we've used our values as the, where to give recognition. We've created e-cards. So, we're all familiar with e-cards. You can send somebody a digital birthday or anniversary card or whatever. But, you could create a digital e-card for each one of your company values. And when you send it on the Slack channel, or maybe it's an email or wherever it is, it's accompanied by, the e-card. And that gives a really nice visual component. And I can imagine, you guys at Blue Hive do such a great job with your branding and, tying into the whole bee theme. And so, you've got the Hive meeting. I'm sure you're using your Hive and, using your buzzwords and all of that. And that really also helps companies internally, when you name it and you brand it, and that the program actually is a program that exists. And so you can talk about it and you can refer to it. So as I said, there are platforms out there that are specifically designed for reward and recognition, and they have all these bells and whistles, but you can also do it, grassroots internally, without making an investment like that. And it's a great opportunity for cross-functional engagement activity, because usually a recognition and reward program, comes out of HR. It's, employee engagement and, workplace engagement. But if you're going to put some branding on it and you need some design, you're probably going to want to pull in somebody from marketing. But then if you're going to start talking about, I shouldn't say but, and if you're going to start talking about how people are going to actually be rewarded in addition to recognized, well, you probably want to know what people want. So it's probably a good idea to get representatives from across the company. And now you've got a recognition team, because, somebody on the marketing team might not want the same reward as somebody on the engineering team. And so you want to make sure that you're getting input from everybody, on what, is going to be meaningful, because there is something, that can kind of backfire when you give a gift it's just not meaningful enough. And, unfortunately these days, like a $5 Starbucks gift card just doesn't go very far. So you're giving me something
The smallest drip
that I
coffee
can't even
is
use
all you
without
can get,
spending
right?
more of my own money, or by the way, I personally don't drink coffee, so I don't go to Starbucks. So
Right.
that I wouldn't want that. But I know Chris was talking about an example with your merch store at Blue Hive, which I think is a great way of giving people choice on, what they could be rewarded with, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, no, perfect. So we hit a chord because we all of a sudden we're getting lots of comments here. So Rob, see you, Zadia again, Chris, and also Jim Gergi. So thanks everybody for dropping stuff into the chat here. Apparently this is a topic of interest. I want to kind of rewind for a half a second to just take us back to Dana's reference point of our quarterly town hall meeting where everybody's there, right? So we create these feelings, and I love the analogy of, like, when people feel appreciated, they literally go through a brick wall for you. So we've just taken, we've got about 80 people who are in our Boston office. The other, we're 110 or so, roughly speaking. So there are other remote folks or Vegas or wherever they might be, but you kind of, and everybody's there. Even remote people are on the cameras. So we're all leaving feeling this like superpower, like, this is awesome. I love this company and I'm ready to go forward. So I want to take basically that feeling and just spin it back to you. So the psychology of appreciation, right? What's going on in our brains, and how does that translate when, I know I kind of get the goosebumps and I'm like, this is such a great decision I made to be at this company. But tell us a little bit about maybe some of those, psychological things that are happening, and then maybe the data that kind of backs that up, if you would.
Sure. I'm no psychologist, but the dopamine rush is real, right?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, we're all on our phones every day and we're looking for the notifications and like we want that rush. And a lot of that rush is healthy, maybe not from social media, but that's the rush that you get when you get recognition and you get the
Mhm.
public recognition. And even if you give it, that is, true science at work that makes you feel good. And so, that's one very small piece of it. But, there was a survey done by a company called Nectar last year that said that, I'm reading from this, that 84% of employees feel that recognition affects their motivation to succeed at work.
84%.
84%. That's like everybody,
That's
right?
almost everybody. Yeah.
And that 78% would be more productive if they were recognized more frequently.
Mm,
And that's not because they're sitting around being lazy. It's because if they're recognized and acknowledged for what they're doing, they're going to get that dopamine rush and then they're going to want to do more. It
right.
all makes sense. 71% of employees would be less likely to leave their organizations if they were recognized more frequently. So, like I said, you can work for two different events companies and literally do the same exact job and have a completely and totally different experience if you feel recognized someplace and you don't feel recognized someplace else.
Yeah.
So,
That's amazing.
even SHRM surveys show that 75% of US employees say morale and motivation would improve if managers would simply say thank you more often. So
Talk
it's
about
like,
moving the
let's
needle without
pause on
spending a
that for
dollar,
a
right?
second.
Yeah.
We could all probably all say thank you more often.
Hmm.
Yep.
Full stop. Right?
So when
So
I was,
it will make a difference to your employees and to their
Yeah.
commitment and productivity and retention and all of that.
I agree completely to the point where I'm going to give an example of proof. And so when I was in high school and college, going to school for design, I always worked at a country club in town as a waitress and in the kitchen. And there were four brothers that were owners, and one of them was in charge of all the weddings. So, say I was waitressing at a wedding, we would all go down to eat supper after we set up the room before the guests would arrive. And it's a wedding facility, so you're always looking to make sure everything's nice. Well, I happened to notice that there was some sliding glass doors, the sun was coming in, there were like little kid fingerprints from like previous wedding. So I went and got some Windex and I'm wiping it down, and everyone else had already gone down to eat. So I was doing this and I'm going to head down to eat, and the owner stops Rick and goes, "Hey, Dana, thank you for doing that." And and I said, "Well, nope, no problem. I'm thinking it was dirty, it needed to be done, so I did it." But he would do that. And so yeah, I was a waitress, it wasn't my job to clean, but it was just part of you were part of the experience, so you made sure it was done. And I just remember thinking, like 16 years old, um, him saying thank you to me whenever I would do something like that. And here I am over 50 and vividly still remembering the owner saying thank you to me whenever I did something that was just slightly above and beyond.
Yeah.
And that just reiterates the classic quote that, while you might not remember exactly what somebody said to you, you remember how they made you feel.
Absolutely.
And you
Yep.
remembered the thank you part of what he said, which is the important part
Yep.
because that's what made you feel good and that's why you're telling this
Yeah.
story,
Well,
10
and he
years later.
also he also treated everyone. It's a wedding venue, so think of them like Caddyshack, right? I mean, these are all high school kids, right, with like a few adults running the show, and so your busboys and your waitresses and the prep in the kitchen and the cocktail waitresses were like the island of misfit toys, really. And so he treated you the way you acted. And at 16, I always acted older because the way I was brought up. I was brought up very firm. Um, and so I appreciated that he treated me the way he didn't treat me like a dumb kid, right?
Mhm.
So he made me feel like a grown up, which at the time is how I acted. So I appreciated that, right? So it goes right back into how it makes you feel.
I want to go the other way. I want to be less of an adult and more like a child.
Oh, we know that about you, Chris. You don't have to
My
like state that.
Epicurean tendencies. Yeah, that's on full display. I'm going to own it right here. I have a specific example of something that just happened, and which I think is illustrating everything that we're talking about. So we'll fall on the sword and admit that I can do a better job as a leader. We have management meetings once a month, which again is just, this is a cultural thing. My wife works in a school system, not to go off on a tangent, but there's been lack of quality leadership for quite some time. And the thing that she gripes about the most is the lack of communication. And just she's like, I just never know what's going on. I don't know what their goals are, and I feel like I'm not a part of the team.
She's in the
Right.
trunk. See,
She's
Mhm.
in the
those
trunk.
boxes.
She's in the trunk. She can't see where they want to go.
Yeah.
So I try to remember this, right? Because I try to learn from all of these things around me. So anyways, we're in the management meeting, and one of the managers from one of the departments speaks up, and he's like, can I just say that my team feels sad and angry sometimes when every other group and organization or within the organization, warehouse, builders, designers, managers, are all recognized, but our group is forgotten for whatever reason, and this particular group is a super important part of the process, but they tend to be on the front end. What they're doing is definitely behind the scenes kind of stuff. And it can go unappreciated. And the message was like loud and clear. And I was like, oh, crap. Because I could think of a specific instance. Yeah, show just happened recently. I sent the pictures back, in the company email to the whole team. Hey guys, awesome. Client super happy. Thanks so much for everybody who touched it. And there were some things that kind of went sideways. So I did name off a handful of names, especially so, blah, 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 right? Which in my mind, I'm like, I'm really kind of rewarding these people in front of everybody. And this is great. But the downside of that is when I forgot to add the person who had done, that particular, very important tasks and associated work on that project, when I failed to name them, I really self-defeated, the whole purpose. I wanted to
Mhm.
pump the team up, and I demotivated that person. I was not intending to do so by any means. I just forgot, but
Mhm.
that's how it came off.
Yeah.
So, that's just a message to the leaders out there who have the best intentions, and they're trying to do the right thing, and they're trying to reward folks for the great effort in public. Just make sure that your list is dialed in and you've got everybody, or you just need to generalize it and say,
Mhm.
like, guys, across the board, team did awesome. Thank
Yep.
you. Every single department, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
The suggestion from this manager was, can we just, if we're going to name names, let's go back and do that, independent or internally, an email, quick, Slack or a text or a Teams message like, hey, dude, awesome job on that. I really appreciate your hard work. So I want to let everybody know across the board. I want to, make sure that my gratitude filters down to all the proper people. But again, so that's the, can be the flip side of it if you don't do it well, or if you haven't put enough thought into like making sure that everybody on that team, gets a piece of that reward pie.
Mhm. Yeah, it's tricky in an industry like ours where every project hits at least a dozen departments.
Yeah.
And then inside that department, it's not always one body from that department. It can be multiple. So that can be a little bit dangerous. Where to your point, Chris, you're trying to do
Mhm.
something good and it's like it backfired a little bit, but at the same time, kind of a really great lesson because moving forward, you know how to do it in a way that your intention will hit the way you want. So,
Yeah. So the next day, I looped in this manager as a CC on my email to the entire sales team, and I said, "Let me just paint a little picture for you. Here's a story, and this is what I did. I made a mistake. Please, when you're showing gratitude to the entire team, make sure you got your list dialed in, and or just keep it really, kind of over the, across the board, and just thank everybody equally, so we don't have this scenario where somebody feels like they've been singled out or underappreciated." Um, Before I kick this back to Dana for the next set of questions, I also want to touch on another thing. And again, not a Blue Hive commercial, but I think we're doing some things really well. And I'm here for 20 years. I love this company. Um, I don't know how many years ago it started, but probably a dozen, at least, maybe more. A group of employees really took it upon themselves to become kind of this voice of employee engagement on the inside. And it's called the Buzz Squad. So we have this internal group. No one owns this job unto themselves, but they've started this group. And initially, it was like, gee, I don't know how management's going to think about this. Like, we're spending time during the company, be paid time during the day, and we're talking about things that are affecting the company. Where they're planning parties, they plan the recognition, they plan the spirit days for once every month. And actually, the opposite happened. This is before Caitlin. This is when Paul was running the company, and he got wind of it, and he was like, "Oh my God, you guys are awesome. he not only loved it, but he fully embraced it. He's like, thank you so much. This is a piece, sorry, that's been missing. He was a bit of a, he wasn't around a lot. He was a bit of an absentee owner, right? He was managing from Florida and only here in the summertime. But he leaned in. He's like, this is great. Like make it official. Like Buzz Squad's a real thing. So we have this internal group, and anybody in the company can be part of the Buzz Squad. And they meet, I think, monthly, and they plan our parties and they plan all these things. We have ice cream, in the summertime when it's hot, and we have these spirit days. We do, beers with Buzz. We meet up once a month or once a quarter or whatever. It's little stuff like that that just makes going to work fun.
Well, especially happening organically like that. I mean, that's just so meaningful. And I think that today, most progressive leaders know that culture is important.
Yeah.
Paul is maybe a little bit of an older school guy, but
Yeah.
recognized the importance, but didn't
Right.
make it happen. But it
Yeah.
happened organically, and that is so powerful. And
Yeah.
that in and of itself is a demonstration of employee engagement. The employees are so engaged that they want to do something outside the scope of their job to make the company better. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, sure, they have to peel off a little bit of work time to do it, but at the end of the day, it just makes everybody more productive, and that supports growth, which is what this is all about. So I love that. I think that's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think again it goes back to ensuring that you're including representatives from across the company in these
Mhm.
initiatives. At my last company, we called it the Culture Club, and had a different name someplace else. I forget, but it's like, you want to make sure that every department is represented, and you're just there to think about how to make it fun, how to make it better, so that you're spending all this time together, whether it's online or in person. You're still investing all of this time, all of this, mental and emotional energy. And you want to be able to like cut loose and do fun things with these people that hopefully you really do enjoy spending time with. And that's why you're there. And that is also, that's another thing that this is a whole other conversation, but people who have friends at work are more likely to stay, because they are engaged, because not just because, they go there to sit and have coffee and have lunch with their friends or whatever,
Mm.
but because you're committed to a common goal, and that you enjoy the people that you're working with to do this together to achieve this common goal.
Mhm.
I've been at a job where I didn't really have a friend. Friendly and camaraderie, but I mean, especially when you're an executive, there's just fewer people that you can really be friends with, and it was hard. I missed it.
Mhm.
Kind of lonely, right? It's like
Yeah, it is a little bit, and they
you
do
need,
say
Yeah, well,
that
'cause
the higher up you get, the lonelier it is.
yeah,
yeah,
well, you spend a lot of time at work, so yeah, yeah, yeah.
right. We're
So
at work a lot longer than we are, at home awake, anyways.
Mm.
So, Rachel, let's talk a little bit about, challenge, like change and challenge. So, do you have any recommendations or personal strategies for keeping teams inspired during a demanding project, or maybe it's not necessarily a project, just a certain time of year where these 2 months we're always sort of drowning. It's just the nature, the rhythm of our business. Um, Anything to kind of support those times?
Well, that's certainly the rhythm of your business, the way event seasons go. So I'm familiar with that. But I think, Chris made a really important point about what his wife said about the lack of communication is what breeds the uncertainty and the concern. Because when people hear nothing, they start to make things up, and they start to say things. And
They
that's
fill in the gaps.
a
They
little bit
guess.
of that, right?
They
And
speculate.
so, right. So when I as a leader foresee a big change, and I know it's coming, and like I can prepare for it, or I mean, even if you can't, you figure it out. I try to make very sure, number one, that I'm, communicating as much as I possibly can within the confines of, whatever the news might be. You might be going through an acquisition. You can't always talk about that, but going through some changes based on goals in the organization. And this may even telling people this may create some uncertainty. that is less uncertain than hearing nothing and having that feeling of uncertainty come from within you, right? So I just really try to do a very, very good job at communicating before, during, and after, not only what's happening, why it's happening, but also just being an empathetic leader saying, I know how this might make you feel if it's putting somebody in a position to feel uncertain about their job, or AI is a huge transition that we're all going through right now. And there are teams that there are people who are fearing for their jobs. I'm going to get replaced by AI. Well, leadership has to address that. And, I personally believe that, AI is a tool that, can make us all bigger, better, faster, stronger. So like, it's a good thing, but, we're still learning how to adapt and work it into all of our organizations. But if you don't talk about it, that's what gives people the concerns. So and then tying it all back, really to recognition and appreciation, is that when you're going through those tough times, or maybe when you've gone through it and it's behind you and you can actually breathe, recognize people for that. We know that was just like the toughest month. Everybody just worked 80 hours a week because we had so many shows. And yes, you got pizza every night. I hope you got pizza every night because you were there every night. But, because we appreciate you so much, and that can come after in a public setting. And maybe there's a reward associated with it, but maybe there's not. But as long as that acknowledgement is there, then people don't have that loneliness. They don't feel like they're doing it for nothing, because there's also just, the camaraderie and all of that helps breed, productivity as well.
Yeah, it's all excellent stuff. And you're spot on. Like our business, we are drinking from the fire hose sometimes, and other times it's kind of crickets. The way that our business works is, from January to June, like we're slammed. The summer is a much slower time frame,
Mm-hmm.
which feels great in the beginning and then starts to feel really weird. And you get nervous and you're like, why don't we have any work? But that's just the way it is. And it's not like we have no work, but there's a lot less, right? When you're coming off this extended season of like everybody's running around with their hair on fire. And then it starts again, and it's even more compressed in the fall. It's mid-August to, after Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And we're cramming a lot of stuff into that short period of time. So I think just that communication, is super important. And I do feel like, we're blessed to have leadership in our particular company. And I know that there's a lot of other companies doing a great job, of it out there as well. And just kind of, building an organization that is resilient, right? It can grow, and it can morph with the times. It can adapt to what's happening with things like AI, economic fluctuations. Everything's up and down, and there's just a lot of unknown in the marketplace. But being somewhere that's stable certainly feels good, right? Versus coming in every week wondering if you're going to have a job next week.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to remember that, when there are, unsettling things, going on externally. And I think I said this earlier on our prep call, it's not necessarily what happens, but it's how you respond or how you react to what happens. And what you can do as a leader when you're going through those challenging times is recognize people and tell them that they're appreciated and make them feel good, because it's not going to make the external factors go away. It's not going to change, the economy, or everything's more expensive, or you can't fly right now, or, whatever. But it's going to make people feel, part of a community. Dana, we talked about that, of their company, that everybody's going through the same thing and that they're understood. And that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
We got a comment from, I'm not sure who that is. I don't know. Juana, if you can see that, LinkedIn user. So all vendors I work with say the communication is everything, and they're always glad for it. Communication is key.
Agreed.
It's pretty hard to over communicate.
Yeah.
Just like it's pretty hard to over recognize.
Yep.
I mean, it's all good.
In my early days, I was a big Tony Robbins fan, and one of the statements that I was 22 years old, and now I'm 58, 40, I don't know, a long time ago, right? Almost 40 years ago. The quality of my communication is the quality of my life, right? It's not just business; it's how you communicate with your spouse, your parents, your kids, like everything. Okay, that was Jim. Yeah. So across the board. So, hey, we are closing in on 50 minutes here on the Toolbox. This has been a great conversation. We're going to start to wrap it up a little bit in hopes that we get out of here and let you guys back to your the real world in under an hour. But we like to close here on the Toolbox with some key takeaways as we're kind of wrapping up. So, Rachel, do you have kind of anything that you want to like really kind of put a pin in and shine a light on, whether we've spoken about it already or if it's maybe something you've kept in your back pocket, but just kind of a couple of takeaways for our listeners and folks watching us that they can maybe take and use and put into action?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've touched on some of these things to some extent, but first and foremost, you want to think about what behaviors you want to recognize. You
Hmm.
know, do you have company values? Are those the things that you want to recognize? And if not, are there other things, and what may those be?
Yep.
Um, Also, really important is to make the time to do it. And I always like to give a shout out to a former coworker named Greg Lederman, who wrote a book called Crave. And it's all about what we crave internally. And that's where I learned about the dopamine stuff. But in the book, he has a concept called 10 minutes by Friday, which is exactly what I said. Can you make 10 minutes by Friday to recognize people?
Mm,
Nobody's too busy to make 10 minutes by
right.
Friday. Come on.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the last piece is, if you are going to do rewards, which companies have to think about, if we're going to do monetary or financial reward, do we have the budget for that? And how's
Mm,
that all going to work? But then there are other kinds of reward, like maybe it's a front row parking spot, if that's something that's coveted, especially like at the warehouse. Or maybe it's an extra day of PTO if, that's something that people, would desire. Or maybe it's shopping at the swag store. But it's letting people choose. It's not giving somebody a gift card to a restaurant that they would never go to eat at, because then that's just not going to make them feel good, which is, backfiring of the whole thing. So, I think those are three very simple things that any leader or really anyone can, just keep in mind as far as, what types of behavior do you want to see, from your teams, from your coworkers, that at the end of the day, are going to help everybody achieve their goals, which is growing the company and making more money. Right.
yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I mean, so just to, I guess, kind of put a bow on that is on the sales side. On the sales side, what are the actions that we want to encourage more of? Well, we coming out of COVID sat with Caitlin and said we want to make sure not only are we holding on to our existing clients, but we want to find new customers, right? So we devised kind of an incentive program for our sales team where when you bring in a brand new logo, somebody that's not worked with Blue Hive in the past, or not just, a spin-off from a company, opened another division or something, but when you have a net new, company that joins the Hive team, they earn an extra commission. And they're entered into a big picture, competition for a new business development competition. So we always want to be, building in that direction. And that came from clarity on like, what is it we're trying to do? Well, we're trying to make sure we get new customers. Okay, well, how do we do that? Incentivize the process. So what you're talking
Well,
about is
and
so
yeah, I
similar.
mean, just the fact that, sales organizations are really good at incentivizing, but they're
Mhm.
not always good at incentivizing the right behaviors. So again, that could be a completely and totally different conversation, but you
Yeah.
guys, obviously you did a really good job at that because you said this is what we need to incentivize, and therefore, they did it. But organizations have to think of incentivizing beyond sales, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
always about incentivizing sales, but everybody else, the group that felt a little bit left out, when you forgot to recognize them,
Mhm.
like, well, they need incentives too. And so, that's where, again, it's all about coming from the top and how it's going to be pervasive through your culture.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Well, this has been great. Does anybody want to add anything to this? I know, Dana, this really kind of was a lovely little topic that you, as a leader within the organization, without your design hat, but really as somebody who kind of looks for ways to improve the organization. I mean, this is totally in that wheelhouse as well.
hmm Well, even like little things I try to do, just as examples that maybe people watching might want to borrow these ideas. Like, for instance, um, once a week we go over all the projects that are in with design. And anytime one of them has sold, it's been signed off on, it's in front of everybody, and we always say, "Good job, nice job, thanks," like, "Good job." Because if without that particular happening at that call, it would just happen behind the scenes. It's like just
Mhm.
the company churning, going, right? But it's just a nice opportunity to say good job in front of all the people who touched it to that point.
Yep.
Um, I try to, if we're in a meeting and someone had an idea, whether they're there or not, something I had learned was try to always make sure you repeat that. Like, oh, like Chris isn't in the meeting, but he had a really good idea the other day. Right. So Evie's not there, he's represented. And someone else might say later on, oh, well, in that meeting, they mentioned you had a good idea. So he knows that his teammates, even when he's not present, have his back. Are still talking about him in a positive way, except for the days when Chris acts like a complete dork and we have to I'm just kidding. But no, like he knows that like we're gonna have his back especially when he has a good idea and he's not there to say it. Like we're not gonna steal his thunder. We're gonna repeat it and give him credit for it.
Catch your children doing something good, and not
Yeah.
just doing something bad, right?
Yeah.
Nice. All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. We're at 55 minutes, and this has been a fantastic conversation. Once again, this show will live on in infinity here on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and then I'm a podcast guy. Like I love listening to this stuff. I go back and I listen to some of our episodes, and I really learn a lot from them. Not only from the conversation, because during the process, it's kind of like I'm trying to map out like where am I going to insert myself and ask a question, but there's a lot of things that can be learned from even listening to something that you were part of on the front end. So Rachel, you dropped a lot of great nuggets here. I'm sure we can learn some things and even, going back and listening over and over again. So that usually comes out, I think on Friday. That hits all the platforms Friday or Saturday. So thank you so much for joining me, Rachel
Thanks,
and
Rachel.
Dana. Thanks everybody who took the time to join us live today. And again, hopefully this has been some really great information. We focus normally on trade shows and events, and this is just a little bit of a broader type of a spectrum, but it's so important to all of us, right? Without a properly well-oiled machine, culture and organizational, prowess to make your company work well, like we're all, you can have the best event in the world, but if your company isn't doing well, then none of that really matters. So
yeah. And Rachel, you have a lot of, knowledge and experience in all this. And I just want the audience to know that you are actually seeking a new adventure.
that's
Yeah,
right.
thank you. I appreciate the plug, Dana. Yep, I am in a fractional CMO role now, and
Okay.
looking to work with more clients, and happy to work with people on reward and recognition programs. That's part of growth, and partnering with HR teams. But at heart, I'm a growth marketer and a marketing strategist, and so the opportunity to come into a company that's looking for some marketing leadership to achieve their goals, I'd love those opportunities. So I'm available on LinkedIn, and I look forward to connecting with people. Thanks, Dana.
You're welcome.
Very good. And Juana, can you pull that up? There it is right there. That's how you find her. Rachel Weeks. That makes sense.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Toolbox, Rachel. And thanks everybody for stopping by. Happy eventing. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. And look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers, everybody.
For having me.